Parents denied school choice in Arkansas because they are white. Man, the progressives have finally figured out how to destroy white culture. Just force the kids to stay in public schools. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start in Arkansas, where a decades-old rule is denying families the opportunity to move to better public schools because they are, wait for it, white. Yep, you heard that correctly. I think this is old back from the days of busing, right, where you had to mandatorily de-discriminate the local school districts. You had to bus kids around and gerrymander who was in different schools. And not that it had much effect on education, particularly in Arkansas or many southern states, but the fact remains is this was what liberal do-gooders thought was the answer 30, 40 years ago. And because of those statutes in some places in Arkansas, you have a situation now where a Arkansas family wants to take advantage of school choice programs, but can't because by doing so, by moving from one to another, that family is going to slightly change the percentages of whites and blacks in those particular areas, and that means no, you can't do it.
So this story actually started out because of the Twitter, where Sam Ganom actually tweeted the rejection letter from the Jesseville Public School District, and it was a letter addressed to a Ms. Elliott. And in the letter, it pretty much just states that, yeah, your kid is white, so you can you're not allowed to come to this school district. And this goes back to a 1989 law, and it determines parent choice of a district based on whether a child's race in the desired district exceeds the percentage in the family's resident district. So in August of 1989, a settlement was actually reached between the NAACP and a class representing black patrons and students. And it said that Garland County school districts, that's in Arkansas, the County Board of Education, and the State Board of Education, that's who it was for, the NAACP and the class of black individuals filed a federal lawsuit seeking to consolidate all Garland County public school districts. Basically, what's happening is we're a bunch of racists now by trying to
we always have
make
been,
it
right? I mean, and it's just staggering to me that every liberal progressive solution to the problems facing education really have no roots in educational change. This isn't about discipline. It's not about opportunity. It's not about work ethic. It's not about better teachers. It's not about better curriculum. It had nothing to do with any of that. It's all about, and this is true of every aspect of modern progressivism. These things are not designed to fix anything. They're designed to change the way things look, right? And who knows that better than American corporations, right? Who've decided that that precious 18 to 35 demographic that they cover more than anything else, these are the ones fresh out of colleges, fresh out of high schools. They've already been conditioned to think and see only in terms of what's right in front of their faces. So it's not going to get any better. It's going to get a lot worse now. And it's just interesting, isn't it, that I go back to a fond talking point of ours, that one of the few remaining rules in Germany today, laws that trace back to the Hitler period. Most of the Nazi legislation has been duly and thoroughly rejected. But there's one little piece of that Nazi ideology that the German people have held on to. You try to homeschool your kids, it's a felony. It's a federal offense. It's a national offense. You can literally have your kids taken away from you. You could theoretically be jailed for it. That one they kept. And so whether we're going back to 1989 for these misguided policies of racial gerrymandering, or we're going back to the 1930s and what the Nazis did in banning homeschool, or what we've talked about with Elizabeth Bartholet many times on this show, the Harvard reformer who wants to highly regulate, if not get rid of homeschooling altogether, it all starts from that place. No one will educate your kids but the state. And by state, I don't mean Arkansas. I mean the state writ large. The state's going to educate your kids. Any fighting of this or any option outside of the state will be attacked, undermined, and ultimately gotten rid of. There will be one education system to bind them. One education system in the darkness bind them, right? Look at all these rings of education that we used to have at the city, the state, local, federal. All of these different moving pieces, all of the opportunities and rights that mothers had, parents had in terms of what goes on in their school. Look at these and all the rings, right, of the educational rings of the public school system.
And there is no Gandalf.
There is no
help
Gandalf.
them and keep
well,
them
I could be the Gandalf.
Okay.
And you could be the hobbits. You could be
Of course I
Mary
am.
or Pippin?
Which one likes food more? They both like the food a lot.
Well, Pippin actually. He's
Pippin
the one
likes
that's
more.
when
Probably
Aragorn's throwing them apples. Pippin says, "Well, because he forgot about second breakfast."
I was going to say, who says second breakfast?
Yes,
Where's second breakfast?
that's you are.
I am
Pippin.
Pippin.
You
I will
are
take
Pippin.
that. Well, just so everyone is aware of the exact statutes and stipulations of what it actually says, in the 1989 law, it gives an exact 3-point prong, basically saying about public school choice and what the limitations and provisions are for it. So there's 8.01 that no student can transfer to a non-resident district where the percentage of enrollment for the student's rates exceeds the percentage in the student's resident district, blah, 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 blah. Basically, if you read through all of this, the fact that they got so specific on this and that they're still following this law, but they're not following any law that actually says something about maybe we should truly educate our kids. Instead, they're focusing just on surface matters as they always do, where it's by color, black versus white. Nothing else matters.
Gotta ask this question in the 30 seconds we've got left in this segment. If this was a black family trying to transfer into a whiter school district, and that somehow changed the percentages, would we be having this conversation right now, or would it have all been quietly handled the correct way?
That's the question.
It's a rhetorical question, which means in Dr. Duke talk, you know the answer, idiots. You know it. You progressive educrats know the answer, and the answer would have been fixed for them.
Since we're talking about colors, we're going to talk about more white people and how in San Francisco, the glorious city that just should fall off the face of the earth, one of the leading art curators in the nation has resigned because he dare say this. Don't worry, we will definitely still continue to collect white artists. And so Gary Gerold, a senior curator of painting and sculpture at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the SFMOMA, was targeted. And a petition of...
Say that again?
SFMOMA.
That's very mellifluous.
Whoa. So a petition of barely 300 people. They couldn't even get like 300 people to sign one of these change.org petitions to get him kicked out. But they said in it, Gary's removal from the SFMOMA is non-negotiable. Considering his lengthy tenure at this institution, we asked just how long has his toxic white supremacist beliefs regarding race and equity directed his position curating the content of the museum. All he did was say during a staff meeting that because we're going to be getting very diverse, we are welcoming all the best art, supposedly, but we're still going to collect white artists. He must resign.
He didn't even go so far as to say we're collecting all the best art.
I know.
He completely.
I'm hoping.
But he completely agreed with the radical left-wing position. You're darn right. As a museum shucks on us. We got too many white guys hanging in these halls. You're absolutely right. We have to decolonize our collections. But don't worry, we're still going to take the best white artists. And that's where he made his mistake. And that's where his own colleagues, we can't use the word colleagues, can we here? His own assassins that he works with decided that that is terribly white supremacist, right? That this is dangerous and violent. To simply suggest that there will be room on our walls for the continuing artistic efforts of Caucasian peoples in their caucasity. That's our word from last week. Caucasity, yep. And so and then I asked, why did he resign? So self-guilty, self-loathing white guy is this dude that when they all attacked him, he just retired rather than standing up to them and saying, look, I'm giving you everything you want as a curator. We're going to diversify these walls, these portraits, these galleries, even if what we're diversifying them with isn't actually art. If all it is politics, masking it in art, we're going to put them on the walls. But we're going to be open to continue. Because if he had said the opposite, if Gary Gerold had said the opposite, the San Francisco Museum of Art will no longer retain or show or purchase art from white people, he would have been gotten rid of for that, the pressure that came from outside. So Gary, I mean, you're a coward. You get, and because you're a coward, you get exactly what you deserve.
Well, ArtNet.com reported that at the meeting, Gerold said that the museum could not avoid collecting the work of white men, which would amount to reverse discrimination. So he actually thought, well, okay, we can't do it. Maybe not that I don't I want to, but we can't because of reverse discrimination. And then he did protest, saying, this is his protest, "I do not believe I have ever said that it is important to collect the art of white men. I have said that it is important that we do not exclude consideration of the art of white men." That's his defense.
So in other words, I am 99.9% in line with the radicals who want to turn art into politics. But it's not that one little percentage makes him a white supremacist. And why are we talking about this on an education show? Well, one of the major purposes of museums is docentry, right? To teach. And so when you see how this spills out into the broader culture, we have a situation where with this iconoclasm, these radical, primarily white 20-somethings who are tearing down statues, effacing buildings, vandalizing, graffitiing, destroying statues. And you've got art curators. There's an art curator from an English university. Odent is her last name, Odent. And she's sending out instructions on how to damage bronze and marble statues of people like Winston Churchill. You have a Sarah Parcak, I believe her name is, at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. She's an Egyptologist, and she has sent out directions to mobs how to pull down obelisks. Now let this sink in. You have a Professor Parcak in Birmingham, Alabama. She spends her life defending and protecting, as a professor and a curator, protecting ancient Egyptian antiquities, including obelisks. But now, because some of the monuments in America of these obelisks, these long, narrow statues, monolithic subject matter, they were honoring the graves of Confederates or Founding Fathers. So because of racism, you get to tear down obelisks. Does Sarah Parcak not know that the first great slaveholding culture in the history of the world was Egypt? And in protecting all of those Egyptian antiquities, you know she would be furious if they took an ancient obelisk and destroyed it. Well, they were built on the backs of slaves. So when it happens in America, they gotta go. The hypocrisy of these people is absolutely staggering.
Well, I mean, Garrels also did truly bow to the mob when he said, "I want to offer my personal and sincere apology to every one of you. I realized almost as soon as I used the term reverse discrimination that this is an offensive term and was an extremely poor choice of words on my part. I am very sorry at how upsetting these words were to many staff."
Right. Let's not call it reverse racism. Let's just call it justice.
Well, I mean, it's reverse discrimination. It's not even...
But that's the point. That's the point, right? That's how they win these battles. Yeah. Discrimination, you and I, rational thinking people who are open-minded, racism is when you use somebody's race to judge them negatively, which is exactly what the progressives at that museum are doing.
Yeah.
And when he points it out, Gary Garrels points that out and then apologizes for it. He is the one who is, because he's a chief curator, he is the one who is leading, not following, in these racist tropes. So it's funny to see the left eat its own, isn't it, right? That this guy was 100% on, 99.999% on your side. He made one slip. You called him a white supremacist, and now he's gone. Well done. And I'm sure you're going to get somebody even farther left to be your next curator. And they're going to put a lot of art in the walls that's not really art. So welcome to San Francisco.
Well, we're going to head on down to Louisiana, where we have another case of a professor tweeting and then deleting the tweet because outrage. This professor says she wants to actually delete her students, so that makes sense. Louisiana State University assistant professor Alyssa Johnson is a biology professor. Okay, biology. Just stick to science. Well, she tweeted a response to the university's official Twitter account, which had stated, "As a public university, we are subject to constitutional limitation on our ability to take action in response to free speech." So, of course, Johnson decided to share that tweet and responded with her own little comment saying, "If LSU won't take action, we as professors can. Keeping a list of names, and if I see them enrolled in my course, I will drop them. It's not just free speech, it's hate speech, and it's a threat to student safety." So much wrapped up in that one little tweet right there.
And what qualifies for hate speech? We actually have a situation where we're going to see it for tomorrow's show, where based on the information we now have, a high school teacher simply said on his own private Twitter, "Donald Trump is our president, and we should support him, not seek to tear him down." Something like that. And for that, at least as far as we understand the facts on the ground right now, that was hate speech. And he was immediately removed from his job. So, and let's throw the picture of that professor up there again. There she is, right? There she is. LSU science biology professor. She looks like she's about 12 years old, right? And there she is. And she's going to be with all of her knowledge of cells and mitosis, right? And all of that great stuff. She's the one who's now going to decide, as a science professor, what constitutes hate speech. And so what do you get when you make every hire, every degree, every position at a university contingent not primarily on what your areas of specialty are, but single thing you do has to have a social justice component? This is what you end up with. And when the university didn't even really dare to slap her down, did they? I mean, they kind of carefully backed away from her. Can you imagine if a conservative professor said this? That anytime any of my students engage in Black Lives Matter rhetoric, which is hate speech, it is promulgated by George Soros and radical anarchists. Its leaders are radical self-avowed Marxists who want to unmake American culture. Can you imagine if a conservative professor said, anytime I have a student who is in any way aligned in their private life with Black Lives Matter, I'm dropping them from my classes? Do you think Louisiana State University would have tiptoed away from this and not really held her accountable?
You just have to start poking the bear on this one. You got to take it upon yourself to just put these things out there.
The tiger is the mascot, isn't it, of the Bengals?
Oh, for them.
Now let's poke the tiger, baby.
What's that? Tiger King?
TV show, yeah.
I didn't watch it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you indicated that LSU did release a statement on their Twitter again. But of course, they apologized for their previous tweet, which simply highlighted the constitutional limitation.
So initially they tweeted LSU, just like Gary Garrels did, that to take that art down would be reverse racism. What was LSU's first tweet?
The very first tweet was basically saying we are subject to constitutional limitation on our ability to take action in response to free speech.
Translation: the law doesn't allow us to do what you're doing.
As much as we would like to.
And then
the
university
apologized.
felt bad about that and said what?
They apologized for their tweet highlighting the constitutional limitation, saying it did not effectively communicate LSU's core message and consequently alienated their students and friends.
Right. So we told the truth about the law, but you didn't want to hear that. So we apologize for telling you what the law says.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Ms. Johnson is not the only one, even within her own department, who is wanting to, as she said, take action by dropping the students. I think she just doesn't want to grade as much. So we have a professor named William Dorler. He responded to Johnson's tweet with, "Thank you. If he enrolls in my class, I'll drop him too." Because don't take biology at LSU. Moral of the story.
How about this? How about every student you drop, we dock your pay 10%. How about that?
Yes.
Let's see how you want to live by your principles. Because if that's the case, I'm going to enroll at LSU and force you to drop me again and again and again, right? Let's just bring down the overall salaries of professors. And you know who the real cowards here again are? Is the university who couldn't say to her, look, or just stood by their original statement. We do not have the right to censor speech, right? And they should have said to her, neither do you. Notice how they never said that? Never in either email did the university say, you do not have the right to do this. It's the cowardly leaders. Garrels was in charge of that museum. The LSU administration in charge of this faculty member are too cowardly to defend American constitutional values, and more often than not, backpedal and find themselves being fired for them, retracting their apologies. Yep.
Yes, that time when we get some real education. And we're going to head to Canada. The Canadian National Vimy Memorial is a war memorial in France that's dedicated to the memory of Canadian Expeditionary Force members killed during World War I. It also commemorates Canadian soldiers of World War I killed in France who have no known grave. The monument is on a 250-acre preserved battlefield park that encompasses a portion of the ground over which the Canadian Corps made their assault during the Battle of Vimy Ridge during the Battle of Arras. The battle became a Canadian national symbol of achievement and sacrifice. The grand project took designer Walter Seymour Allward 11 years to build.
And I want to first point out that this really beautiful memorial, it's in France, has been recommended to us at the Dr. Duke Show by viewer Carolyn Peterson. So Carolyn, thank you so much for doing that. I was unfamiliar with this battlefield monument before you suggested it. So we're really grateful here at the Dr. Duke Show when you turn us on to some new instant classics, right? We're just turned on, aren't we, Katie? You turned on?
Nope.
I'm turned on. I'm turned on by this. Turned on by education. So take a look at some of the monuments here. This really does mark the moment. And you in the context of everything we've been talking about in this show, how long is it before Western liberal democracies like the Canadians, like the Americans, start coming after these monuments? How soon before these monuments to the bravery of those who fought in wars, right? Whether the wars were just or not, that comes under the ire of our protesting clown show progressive left. But this is the Vimy Memorial, right? And it marks the Canadian history books, at least pre-modern ones, pointed to this battle. It's the first time in Canadian history, really, where 4 unified divisions, almost the entire excursionary corps of the Canadian Army, fought in unison against a foreign enemy. And it was done here against the Boche, against the Germans. There were a number of the French had tried to dislodge the German control of this ridge. The British tried to dislodge it, couldn't do it. There were a brave corps of Moroccan fighters fighting with the Allies who tried to dislodge the Germans from this ridge and couldn't do it. And it was the Canadians who finally did. And over a 2 or 3 days in 1917, they managed to get to, right after Easter, they managed to get and take over this ridge that the Germans had very strategic position, and lost about 4,000 men. And about 10,000 casualties overall, 3,000, almost 4,000 had died. And when, after the war was over, the French government gave the Canadian people, like they gave after World War II, parts of the beaches of Normandy, overlooking Normandy for the beautiful American monument to those who helped the D-Day push. The French gave a 250-acre plot on the ridge, or near the ridge, to the Canadian government. And over a series of years, they built this monument. And as you can see, it's a beautiful thing. It's very clean and sober. A certain kind of limestone the sculptor wanted. He wanted a limestone that was luminous and that over time would not fade. He actually found it in an ancient Roman mine in what is today modern Serbia, I believe, or Croatia. Croatia, I think it is. So it's luminous limestone. And if you look at some of the haunting figures there, so the figures of suffering, justice, peace, liberation, it really is a nice combination of classical. I mean, it was actually very Art Deco before Art Deco really took off, when you stop and think about it there. And so very well done. And what is interesting about this monument is on this 250-acre grounds, they have live ammunition that was never exploded from World War I, is strategically positioned. They have actual tunnels and trenches from the battlefield on that site that have been there ever since 1917. And for a lot of reasons, because of the dangerousness of the site, generally speaking, visitors, the public isn't allowed to see most of the site. They can get to that, but they're not allowed, they're very often discouraged from walking around the ground. So it is a very deeply guarded and very important message, a monument that many people have pointed to, the moment where Canada as a country coalesced and became a culture of its own, with its own commitments and its own self-agency, and that they point to that moment as a unifying one for the Canadians, at least as long as the history books remain written by people who care about such things.
And there you go, eh? As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. As a reminder, Freedom Project Academy's live online school wraps up enrollment tomorrow. Less than 24 hours away. So if you still want to get in for the 2020-2021 academic year, you must submit your online application no later than tomorrow, Friday, June 24th. Visit freedomforschool.com. That's freedomforschool.com to enroll. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. Perhaps the most famous curator of all is none other than Ross Geller. Others may argue it's Dr. Marcus Brody. Marcus Brody is an ally to Indy and his dad. The more you know.
So lost. I guess that makes me a hoser, eh? And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, poutine for everybody, my friends.